So it's important to realize that our memories aren't perfect. There are things that you want to remember, things you study, and you get to that exam and you just don't remember for some reason. There's things you've experienced that you forget or you remember differently than somebody else. And that's because of the fallibility of memory. So now we're going to talk about some of those instances. We'll talk about amnesia, the different types of amnesia. We'll discuss the unreliability of eyewitness testimony. We'll discuss encoding failures. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a good understanding of the problems with our memory. So amnesia is one problem that we have with memory where we just don't remember certain things. And here's just a couple of Hollywood versions of memory issues or amnesia. We have Memento, where he couldn't remember things. Something traumatic had happened to him. And so he had tattoos all over his arm to help him try to remember what he was finding out. He had notes everywhere. We have Dory, where she couldn't remember, things that had happened to her. And then in the second movie, we find out that she had a traumatic event as well. Here we have 51st Dates, where she had a traumatic head injury. And in Shattered, there's also a horrible car crash and amnesia. And so the definition of amnesia is the loss of long-term memory associated with traumatic brain injury, which we've seen from some of our movie examples, disease, or it could even be a psychological trauma. So now we're going to talk about the two major types of amnesia. So anterograde amnesia is the loss of ability to form new memories. So in 51st Dates, Drew Barrymore, after her car accident, she couldn't form new memories. So her dad and her brother, if you remember, they just kept repeating the same day over and over again so that she wasn't traumatized by this loss of memory. This is also the type of memory that HM had. He had the inability to form new episodic memories. Retrograde, on the other hand, is a loss of memory events from before the brain damage. Old memories from the past. Now, it's been a while since I've seen Shattered, but I want to say that that's the type of amnesia that the main character had in Shattered. We also see retrograde amnesia often in any soap opera. And I don't think Days of Our Lives is even on TV anymore, but it was one that I watched back in the day. And, so you turn on the TV, you find a soap opera, and there's going to be somebody on there that doesn't remember who they are, where they came from, anything about their past. And so that's just kind of a common theme in soap operas, right? So here's a little diagram to hopefully help you understand you had trauma, damage to the brain of some sort, and anterograde would be that you don't remember new memories. Retrograde would be that you're not remembering things from the past. So before we go on and talk about some of the reasons why we forget, let's talk about what happens when we're remembering, and that might help us understand why we sometimes forget certain things. So consolidation is going to be the formation of new memories. Sometimes it's also called memory construction. So when we recall a memory, it's subject to what's called reconsolidation. And so this is the modification or restorage of memories. So let's say you experience something with your family. So this is my family in, I think, Bryce Canyon a few years ago. And, when we pull up pictures or we talk about it, my children have certain memories, probably not the same as mine because they were much younger than me. And so when we talk about it or see pictures, they then reconsolidate that memory and remember it differently. And here's another picture from a family trip. This was in Colorado Springs. Garden of the Gods, I think is what it was called. And again, if you think about it, look how much younger that Camille is than Carrie. And so Carrie may remember certain things differently than Camille just because of the way that they encode things, right? And so again, it's important to understand when this consolidation is happening, there's changes occurring in our brain. There's protein synthesis that consolidates and encodes those memories. And when we reconsolidate and recall those memories, it can modify those. Researchers have done a lot of studies on this showing how our memories change over time. So now we're going to talk a little bit about eyewitness testimony. And while eyewitnesses are really important in solving crimes, we need to realize that they're not without their own problems due to the fallibility of memory. This also helps us understand a little bit about what happens during reconsolidation and why our memories can change over time with that reconsolidation. So there's something called suggestibility, and this is the tendency to incorporate information from others into one's own memory of an event. So whether this is your family talking about something you've experienced and now you remember that as a part of your own original memory, or think about this in terms of a criminal investigation. You have an eyewitness who's being questioned by officials, and they have to be careful not to ask leading questions. Things like, what color was the person's hat? Well, that implies that they were wearing a hat. Another example would be, maybe they have an idea of who the perpetrator was, and instead of asking, did the assailant have tattoos or other identifying marks, they might ask, did you notice the tattoo on the perpetrator's neck? Or did you see a skull tattoo on the perpetrator's arms? So the latter two are very much leading questions, right? They're suggesting to that person that there was a tattoo. It can actually implant the memory in their brain that there was a skull tattoo, perhaps. And flat out deception can also change somebody's memory of an event, right? When you purposely mislead the individual to think something occurred that didn't occur. And the younger the individual is, the more suggestible they are typically. And we also have some people are more suggestible than others. So this leads to what's known as the misinformation effect. So this is after exposure to some sort of misinformation about an event, an individual may actually misremember that event. Now, Elizabeth Loftus has done a lot of research in this area. She has extensive studies on how exposure to misinformation about an event can cause an individual to misremember. So she has her famous car crash experiment, right? Where she showed people a video of a car crash, and then she asked a series of questions. And one of those questions was about how fast were the cars going when they blanked into each other. So the blank was a series of different verbs: hit, contacted, collided, bumped, smashed. And when the individuals, they saw the same car crash, they reported different speeds based on the verb that was provided. Most of the time, that's kind of where the summary of this experiment ends. But she also did a second experiment. It was published in the same paper, where another group of participants again watched the video of the car crash, and then they were asked a series of questions with the same critical question. The difference was that only smashed and hit were used as the verbs. She then had participants come back a week later, and she asked a critical question: did you see any broken glass? And the results found that those who had the word smash the prior week were more likely to report seeing the broken glass, even though there wasn't any. So again, here's just showing the different verbs that were provided and the estimate of speed, with contacted being the lowest and smash being the highest. This leads us to a short discussion about repressed memories and false memory. So repressed memory is an autobiographical memory that an individual is unable to recall. So some sort of episodic type of memory that you can't recall for some reason. Typically, it's traumatic or stressful in nature. And the idea that we can repress memories isn't what's so controversial. There are definitely things that we forget, whether we repress them purposefully or it's some sort of natural mechanism. That's unknown and still debated. But the idea that we can recover repressed memories is controversial. So the idea that there's something that we can't remember that we then later can remember is something that is quite controversial. And these are, again, called into question because of the fallibility of memory. Were these recovered memories due to the suggestibility of the individual? Was there misinformation provided? Was there deception that occurred? Were leading questions part of the recovery of this? And again, the problem is, we just saw, memories can be easily manipulated. And so often, people will say that these recovered memories are actually false memories. And again, Loftus has done a lot of research showing how easy it is to form false memories in individuals. And Loftus isn't the only researcher. There's a whole wealth of research out there on false memories. So a false memory is a fabricated or distorted memory for an event that actually never happened. Unfortunately, a lot of the memories that are called into question are allegations of abuse or rape. In the 1980s, there was this huge number of satanic cults that led to child abuse, or so it was reported. And while some may have been true, many others later were found to be false. Today, there's no shortage of inspiration for false memories. I have a friend who represents the Boy Scouts of America, and they've had a big problem, like the Catholic Church, with claims of sexual abuse. So I was having this conversation with her, and I was like, "Oh, so you represent Boy Scouts of America, huh?" And it's all because of these sexual abuse allegations. And she says that Boy Scouts has no problem paying actual victims. They want to pay these individuals and help these true victims. She says that there's a lot of people, though, that come forward that are clearly false, and her job is to identify those false accusers.